Hey, Dr. C here. I hope you had a nice Christmas, and it's very good to see you here again. I'm wearing a very loud plaid shirt today to try to keep you awake because we're going to talk about sleep. And I want you to understand that you need to be awake in order to understand what's going on. So let's really approach it. It's crazy how they try to define sleep, and by they I mean the so-called experts. They try to define it, and how do they define it? They pick out the different aspects that occur at sleep, and they put that into the definition. So they say that it's a natural, periodic, reversible state which is characterized by no wakefulness. Well, hell, you're asleep, no wakefulness. Loss of consciousness, so you're unconscious, which also is something that the psychiatrists like Freud actually loved. Your eyes are closed, your muscles are relaxed, no reaction to the surroundings, and dreams occur. Well, what else are you going to say? Those are all the aspects of sleep, and that's how they define it. Well, okay. What is involved with sleep? We know that it is an aspect of our lives that's being studied a lot now. And there are various aspects of the brain now, because of all of the technology that's out there, various aspects of the brain that they are studying, and they are picking up little things almost every month. You see something, some new neurotransmitter or something related to the whole aspect of either awake or sleep. So what are the important things in the anatomy? Well, the important areas of the anatomy are, number one, the hypothalamus. Now, you've probably heard that term before, the hypothalamus. Of course, sits right next to the thalamus. It's a neighbor, but it's deep in the brain. They call that portion of the brain, the real deep part of the brain, not the stuff that you see on the outside that looks like a walnut, that's the cortex, nothing to do with that. This is the deeper part called the limbic system of the brain. And it's in that hypothalamus that there are several areas that control at least some of the rhythms that induce sleep. The very first one in the hypothalamus is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Whoa, that's a big word, suprachiasmatic nucleus. Basically, it's roughly about 20,000 or so neurons that have congealed into one little area right in between the eyes, inside, right in between. And what it does, it picks up light. And in that light, they can generate a little charge, one of those neurotransmitters, and it goes to different portions of the brain. Now, one of the portions of the brain, when the light is absent, like at night, for example, if it's absent, then we're supposed to secrete in our little pineal gland, which also sits in the middle, in between the two sides of the brain. The pineal gland produces melatonin. And so that's one of the theories, that a defect, therefore, in either the nucleus, that suprachiasmatic nucleus, or in the pineal gland, but somewhere in that transmission, a little problem there would cause a problem with sleep. Okay? That's one of the areas that we're interested in. Also, we're also interested in various portions of that hypothalamus, because certain other portions of that hypothalamus control other things in the body. Like, for example, hunger. And, why do you get hungry? Well, it's all controlled up there in that hypothalamus as well. And there are certain little neurotransmitters that will make you feel hungry when you haven't had any sufficient food. So, nevertheless, we're going to deal not with these other things, but basically with the sleep right now. So, we got that suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now, in that lateral portion of that hypothalamus, we also have another nucleus. And that nucleus also secretes a material that will cause arousal. So, you have something that may induce sleep, something that may induce awakenedness, arousal. So, mostly the people who deal with this are into all of the neurotransmitters, all these different substances that are secreted in the neurons of the brain itself, go out to the tip of that neuron and get transmitted to the next neuron, and then goes on and on and on. Very quickly, matter of seconds, bang. These things can transmit very quickly. But there are also different neurotransmitters that inhibit. They won't allow the neurotransmitter to connect to the next neuron. So those are called inhibitory neurotransmitters. So they're learning a lot about these things, and obviously that has something to do with whether you're sleepy or whether you're awake. Okay, what are some of these neurotransmitters? Well, first of all, they're all classified, you might say, as hormones, but they're really neurotransmitters. Histamine. Histamine is probably the most potent of all of them. That's why if you take an antihistamine, you get sleepy. Like, say you take some Benadryl to go to sleep. Okay, you get a little sleepy because it is working against, it's inhibiting that histamine. Okay, so histamine is one of the important ones. Dopamine is another one. Acetylcholine is another. Orexin, they were studying that in terms of the food, the hunger that you may have. And in the process, they saw that it also influenced sleep. So orexin also induces the arousal. In other words, don't sleep, arousal. Remember, we're awake usually 16 hours a day and asleep 8 hours a day. So that arousal mechanism is probably more important to you than the other mechanism for sleep. And there are certain neurotransmitters then that do the opposite. They make you sleepy. For example, adenosine. Now, adenosine is a byproduct of the metabolism of the cells, the neurons and all. And they are an inhibitory. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. So it inhibits the ones that are going to induce awakenedness or arousal. So that's why you feel sleepy, because the adenosine, which builds up during the course of the day, builds up, reaches a threshold, and then you may feel sleepy because now it's beginning to inhibit the arousal neurotransmitters. Okay. Now, other ones too are, like I mentioned, melatonin, and of course, pharmaceutical houses took up on that right away. They're producing large doses now of capsules with melatonin, which may or may not really induce sleep that well. But as we get older and the pineal gland isn't secreting as much melatonin, it may be helpful for sleep. Okay, so that is sort of the mechanisms. Now, why do we need to sleep? What the heck? Why are we wasting a third of our life sleeping? And in fact, when you look at the history and all, infants sleep 16 to 18 hours a day. And that's because the brain is developing. And the have a lot of that, what they call REM, rapid eye movement sleep, during which time the brain is expanding and gaining different factors to become eventually an adult. So 16 to 18 hours for the small infants. What do we need as seniors? Because this is really what I'm talking about now. I'm talking mostly to the seniors in this. We need 7 to 8 hours a day. 7 to 8. We don't need more than that. 7 to 8 hours a day of sleep. So the National Sleep Foundation, in fact, states that even the regular sleep for the adults under 65, 7 hours seems to be pretty sufficient. And so 7 to 8 for over 65 isn't unusual. So begins, you need a lot more, teens a little less, but still a lot more than we do, and then finally to the elderly. Okay, so let's talk about other reasons why how do we get sleep? Well, you've heard of a thing called circadian rhythm. That is based on a 24-hour day. And the circadian rhythm, in fact, the circa just comes from the old Latin or Greek, around, and then dia, the day, so 24-hour day, circadian rhythm. So during the daytime, the light hours, we are doing things, we're active, we have the arousal neurotransmitters, and during the night, we have the inhibitory ones, so we feel more sleepy. So basically, that's a circadian rhythm. We also have in our body another rhythm as well. These are all biologic rhythms. That is the diurnal rhythm. Now, that is the day-night, light-dark rhythm that we go through. Now, there are many other rhythms in our body. For example, women may have a rhythm that controls their menstrual cycle. That's every month. We may have some rhythms in our body that are much shorter, more frequent than that. So there's basically the 4 types of rhythms that are out there. The circadian, diurnal, ultradian, infradian, those are all different rhythms in our body. And we follow that. We basically follow that. Why do we sleep? What the heck? Why do we sleep? Well, there are several theories, and they're only theories. Nobody knows it's absolutely for sure why we sleep. But number one, people who believe in all of the evolution theories and all feel that back in the old, many, many centuries ago, the people slept at night to protect themselves. That's what they were doing. At least that gave them another 8 hours so they didn't get chomped by one of the Tyrannosaurus that are out there. So that's the evolutionary theory, basically. Inactivity means safety. Another one was, you needed to conserve your energy. You've been active all day long. You need to conserve it a little bit. So you sleep. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Another theory is a restorative theory. The theory is that you need to renovate the brain. You need to restore the brain. You need to get rid of all of the toxins and all that have accumulated during the day, and you need to restore, and you do that during sleep. And we know that certain portions of the brain are very active at night, and they can restore sleep. So, and then the final theory, I guess you might say, is the brain plasticity. Now, by plasticity, we means that the brain can change. Now, we know that the brain can change because you look at the brain of an infant, and they get 16 to 18 hours sleep a day, and during that time, the brain is developing all the time, especially that first 2 years of life. Brain is developing very rapidly back then. And they're finding out that even in adults, the brain can change. So they call that the brain plasticity theory. So those are the four theories that are out there on why we sleep. Let's talk about something else. What happens, how come it's more difficult for the elderly? What's going on with the elderly? Well, aging and sleep. There's a lot of papers now being written about that, because roughly half the elderly, which means over 65, half of them have some problems with sleep. And in fact, insomnia is a problem at any age group. But there are reasons for it. For example, pain. And now we're talking the elderly, we're talking the elderly now. What are the reasons for problems with sleep? Pain is number one. It is an issue because we're focusing on the pain rather than allowing our brain to decompress and to get some sleep. Men out there, unfortunately, there's a significant number, almost 20%, who have to get up to pee maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times at night. So they've got to deal with it, but that keeps them awake. They have to keep waking up, going back, waking up, going back. So that is an issue. And roughly about 17% now of people have symptoms that would suggest sleep apnea. In other words, you stop breathing. Now, the sleep apnea may be just something that is a problem with the tissues in the body. And in fact, some of the people back then were doing things like taking out that uvula, that little piece of tissue that hangs down in the back of the throat, stuff like that. That may be partially to blame, but certainly not a big issue. So there's a number, like I said, up to 17% of people who will have symptoms of sleep apnea. And so some people have restless legs. In other words, the muscles in the legs are moving all the time, driving you crazy. You got to change a position because the legs are very active. Muscles are contracting, and it would drive your partner crazy if you're in bed with your partner, obviously, because you get whacked with a leg. Now, there are medications that are out there for restless legs, but we're not going into that now. These are just the reasons for problems sleeping in the elderly. Also, there are some of the elderly who have daytime drowsiness. They walk around in the daze all the time. It's sort of like you might do if you had a couple of belts of alcohol. You're in a daze. So that happens with a few people. Fortunately, very small number, but nevertheless, that happens. And then finally, there are people who actually have a disorder, a sleep disorder. And how do you define these sleep disorders? Well, the sleep disorders are generally part of a sleep study. If you, for example, go to your doctor and you say, "Listen, I have trouble sleeping. I'm not sure why. My wife says I snore. I get up 3-4 times at night." Well, what he's going to do, he's going to do his physical examination. He's going to get a good, thorough history, at least your interpretation of why you're not sleeping well. And then he may order then a polysomnogram, which is what we know as a sleep study. Now, what is that sleep study? What the heck? What do you have when you have a sleep study? Well, if you have a study done, that polysomnogram is going to tell you a number of things because they set you up physiologically to get a large number of measurements. And You got crap coming out of every extremity, around your chest, on your finger, measuring your blood pressure, measuring your pulse rate. You've got something measuring the movement of the eyes. You've got something measuring the brain wave. You've got an EKG attached. It's a wonder you can sleep with all this crap all over you, but nevertheless, this is the way they run this thing. They get a maximum amount of data from these sleep studies, which go all night. And so what does that sleep study tell you? Well, as a result of that polysomnogram, they have defined several points, several ways that they break up that night of sleep. Number one, you go through a transition stage, a very brief transition stage. They call that N1, for whatever, but that's very, very brief, usually less than a half hour. Number two, then, the N2, that is the light sleep. And the light sleep is the largest of all of the longest, I should say, of all of the sleep phases that you have. So you're beginning to relax during that phase, but you're not totally asleep. You're still aware of things that are around you that can wake you up in a jiffy. The next phase is the deeper sleep. And the next phase, that shows up because they're doing that brainwave study all the time. And now they begin to see a slowing of the brain waves. That's a deeper sleep now. And so that occurs roughly about 20% of your sleep time. Then you go into what's called the REM sleep. That's rapid eye movement. The eyes are moving all the time in a horizontal direction. They're moving. Now, what's important about the REM sleep is that you dream during that phase. Now, they're finding out you may dream also outside of that REM sleep, but traditionally, it's during the REM sleep that you do most of your dreaming. Now, people like Freud, Jung, all those, they love to analyze dreams. And of course, they put all sorts of connotations to those dreams. And so there's a lot we don't know about it yet. But boy, they sure as heck love to analyze dreams. But nevertheless, the REM sleep is usually only 20 to 25% of the time of all of that sleep. So you go through these different phases from N1 to N5, different phases of the cycle, and it may cycle maybe 3 times or so during the course of the night. The later ones, in other words, as you approach the morning hours, you're getting more REM sleep, and that's when most of the dreams occur in those later phases of that. So, at any rate, let's talk a little bit further. We know, too, that you can take a nap. Now, are naps beneficial? Well, most people now say yes, but you need to be only in that range of 20 to 30 minutes. That's the kind of the peak nap time, 20 to 30 minutes. If you don't go longer than 30 minutes, you're not going to get a good restful nap. It's going to have some side effects. If you go less than 20 minutes, you're probably not going to get the maximum benefit. So perfect nap time is 20 to 30 minutes. Good. Okay, let's nap. There are things that affect the sleep. Obviously, medications affect it. Stress really affects sleep because of that cortisol that the stress is inducing. But also medications do affect it. Caffeine obviously affects it because of its effect on the histamine, because it's an antihistamine as well. But also, the caffeine has an effect on that adenosine. Remember I told you the adenosine, it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It inhibits awakeness. So, Caffeine influences that particular thing and keeps you awake. So a lot of the medications also do affect it. What should you do? How can you sleep? That is the biggest question that people always ask. What can I do to improve my sleep? Well, let's go over some of the things that you can do. Good sleep habits, number one. In other words, avoid anything that's going to influence the sleep, like drinking something that has caffeine, like chocolate or coffee, caffeinated tea, cola drink, anything that has caffeine in it. Caffeine will have an influence for about 6 hours, so you better watch out taking that late at night. Chocolate has has an amount of caffeine in it as well. You have to remember that. What else can you do? Well, first of all, you want to go to bed roughly at the same time every night and try to awake at the same time. So a good, stable rhythm to your sleep habits. Going to bed and waking around the same time. You want to limit your time with your damn tablet or your phone or whatever it is, TV, whatever. Limit that time, especially at night. Limit your screen time. Limit any other thing that may be stimulating you, like having your alcoholic toddy too late at night. Limit a heavy meal at night. The best sleep, usually you have their better meal in the noontime hour. So exercise to the point where you actually get a little tired from doing it. Best thing you can do. Doesn't cost you a dime. Exercise is an excellent way. Optimize your bedding. If it's your pillow that you just can't get used to, get a damn new pillow. You also make sure your bed doesn't have that big curve because you haven't changed your mattress in 20, 30 years. Make sure also about your sleep position. How do people generally sleep? Some sleep better on their side. Some sleep better on their back. Figure out which one is best for you. Temperature. Temperature is very important as well. You don't want it too cold. You don't want it too hot. You want to keep the temperature at about 68 degrees. So watch what you take for meds at night. Don't take a lot of the sleep meds, especially the elderly. For God's sakes, don't take a lot of the benzodiazepine, like Valium or one of those, Lexapro, all of those different benzos. Also, they now have Z drugs, like Lunesta, Ambien, Sonata. Avoid those as well. You should also avoid the tricyclics like amitriptyline, nortriptyline, doxepin, all those types of medications. Try the melatonin. Also, now you can use any of the cannabinoids. The cannabinoids now are made so that they also include with them the terpenes. And it's the terpenes that may have a bigger influence on a sleep habit. So you need to talk to somebody about what is the ideal cannabinoid to use. And you need to go to a reputable store in order to do that. So we went through a lot of stuff. I'm sorry that we had to rush to do it. But, sleep is a very interesting topic. And obviously, I'm trying to keep you awake, like I said at the beginning. This is Dr. C. Have a good night's sleep.